My name is Susan Gregory. I'm 30 years old, and here's how my story begins. 2 weeks ago, if you open my Google Calendar, you'd see an entry titled Operation 30 color-coded, meticulously planned, and optimized down to the minute. Because that's who I am. I plan things. I build things. I make sure the people I love feel taken care of. And the man I loved, Aaron, was about to turn 30. For 3 months, I had been quietly constructing the kind of birthday weekend people brag about on Instagram. A weekend that felt expensive, cinematic, extravagant. And I wasn't doing it for clout. I was doing it because I genuinely believed he deserved it. Friday night reservations at the Vane, one of the hardest restaurants to get into in the city. I'd pulled strings, traded favors, even taken on extra freelance hours to justify the cost. Saturday, a spa day for him and his closest friends, followed by a surprise overnight stay at a boutique hotel downtown. Sunday, champagne brunch at a rooftop garden. Total cost about $4,000. Total emotional investment, all of me. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the time. I loved him. I wanted him to feel valued. But while I was securing reservations and ordering custom gifts, Erin was securing something else. Something I didn't see coming. Her name was Lila, his coworker. At first, she was just a name in a story. The new girl in marketing. The one with the loud laugh. The one who can't format spreadsheets. Then suddenly she was everywhere. Lila brought him coffee as a joke. Lila stayed late with him because they were collaborating. Lila texted him memes at 11:30 p.m. I'm not a jealous woman. I've had male friends my entire life. I understand workplace friendship, collaboration, camaraderie. But the tone changed. The moments stretched, and the boundaries blurred. Day by day, I felt him drifting not physically but emotionally. And then came the nights. Nights when his phone screen lit up the room at midnight with her name. Work question, he would say. Just decompressing, he would insist. But the expression on his face, soft, private, intimate, I hadn't seen that look directed at me in months. I felt something crack in my ribcage each time. One night he sighed the irritated theatrical sigh of someone who believes they're morally superior. Susan, you really need to work on your insecurity, he said, not looking up from his screen. Lila is going through a rough patch with her boyfriend. I'm being supportive. That's what emotionally mature people do. Ah, there it was. The therapy language weaponization. Aaron had begun binging online therapy content, TikTok gurus, Instagram infographics, and suddenly he was Dr. Gregory diagnosing me with emotional deficiencies every time I asked for basic respect. If I said I didn't like him texting another woman late at night, I was controlling. If I asked why Lila took him to lunch 3 times a week, I was projecting. If I looked hurt, he called that toxic emotional dependency. But the moment everything shattered was 3 days before his birthday. I had just picked up his birthday gift, a vintage watch he'd pointed out at an antique store 6 months ago when I came home to find him on the balcony speaking in a lowered, intimate whisper. When I slid the door shut behind me, he jolted like a guilty teenager. Who was that, I asked, placing the gift bag in the hall closet. He hesitated. Just Lila. His cheeks were flushed. She's having a crisis, he added quickly. Oh, it's always a crisis when I'm not around, I said, trying to keep my voice even. You wouldn't understand, he snapped, brushing past me into the kitchen. You're so emotionally rigid. Lila actually allows herself to feel things. I'm helping her regulate. I swallowed. Regulate what? Her anxiety, he said. She had a panic attack in the break room today. I placed my bag on the counter slowly. Aaron, what did you do? He looked at me like I was dense. Susan, relax. We went into the quiet room and laid on the couch. The lights were off. I held her while she calmed down. I stopped breathing. You cuddled her, I said. At work. For like an hour, he said, casually pouring himself wine. It's a somatic regulation technique. Totally platonic. I stared at him, the air thickening around us. You're a man in a committed relationship, I said quietly. You were lying in the dark holding another woman. Does that honestly sound appropriate to you? He took a long sip of wine, unbothered. Oh my God, Susan, stop sexualizing everything. Lila and I have a soul connection. It's emotional. It's healing. Just because you're uncomfortable with intimacy doesn't mean I have to shrink myself for you. He looked at me, then really looked at me as if he pitied me, as if he believed he was enlightened and I was primitive. My work wife and I cuddle sometimes, he said, pronouncing every word like a knife. It's harmless. If you don't get it, that's your issue. Maybe talk about it in therapy. He expected a fight. He expected tears, yelling desperation. Instead, something inside me clicked. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pain. It was the sensation of a heavy weight simply sliding off my shoulders. I saw with perfect clarity that he didn't fear losing me. He believed he owned my devotion, that I would accept disrespect because he dressed it in therapy buzzwords, that I would continue paying the bills, planning his birthday, carrying his emotional load, while he gave his intimacy to another woman. He was waiting for me to break, but I didn't. I exhaled slowly, poured him another splash of wine, and said, "You're right." He blinked. Confusion flickered across his face. "I am," he whispered, his voice softening, smugness returning. "Absolutely," I said, smiling gently. "If this is what you need, who am I to judge?" The relief in his eyes was instantaneous. He believed he had reshaped me. "Thank you, Susan," he said, reaching to touch my arm. "It means so much that you're trying to grow for me." I smiled. "Oh, I'm growing," I said softly. "I'm seeing everything very clearly now." He beamed. He thought he had won. But that night, while he slept beside me, facing away, texting Lila goodnight, I lay awake planning something else entirely. By dawn, I knew exactly what I would do. And it started with a single thought. Service was no longer needed. The next morning, Aaron left for work with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed he had successfully educated his girlfriend. He kissed my cheek, casually grabbed his thermos, and said, "Don't forget the dry cleaning for Friday." His tone held the soft command of someone who assumed everything was still in place: my loyalty, my devotion, my emotional patience. I smiled faintly and told him I wouldn't forget. He didn't notice the difference in my voice. He didn't sense the absence of tension. He didn't realize I wasn't upset because upset implies attachment. I sat at the kitchen table after he left, the early morning light creeping across the floor. My coffee went cold while I opened my laptop. At the top of my task list was Operation 30, organized with tabs, reservation, confirmations, schedules, and notes. For 3 months, I had treated this like a special mission. Now looking at it, everything felt foreign, like a blueprint for a house I would never move into. I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. I simply began deleting. The first call was to the Vein, the restaurant I'd sacrificed pride and favors to get into. A young hostess answered, her voice gentle and poised. "Good morning, The Vein. How can I assist you?" "Hi," I said calmly. "I have a reservation for 6 this Friday under the name Susan Gregory. I need to cancel it." "Of course," she replied. "Would you like to reschedule?" "No." "But I do have a special request," I said. "Could you please note the cancellation with a specific reason?" "Yes, ma'am. Which reason should we list?" "Service no longer needed." There was a pause, then the soft sound of typing. "All right, it's in the system." "Thank you." I ended the call and stared at my screen for a moment, letting the words settle. Not for me, but for him. Those 4 words would be the first domino, the message he'd understand too late. Next was the spa. I canceled every appointment, his massage, his facial, the grooming package his friends were excited about. Then I called the boutique hotel and withdrew the reservation for Saturday night. After that, the florist, then the bakery, then the boutique where I'd bought the vintage watch. The manager was kind, almost apologetic, that she had to ask about the reason for the return. "Change of plans," I said simply. By noon, Aaron's birthday weekend was gone, effortlessly erased. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years, like I had finally stepped out of a room with stale air and opened a window. By 2 o'clock, my suitcases were packed. I moved in complete silence. It was astonishing how quickly I could separate my life from his clothing, electronics, documents, toiletries, sentimental items I'd kept neatly in drawers. I even unplugged the coffee maker I'd bought before we moved in together. When I zipped the last suitcase, the apartment felt hollow, but not in the heartbreaking way I expected. It felt like the end of a job assignment, like I had completed all the tasks on my list, closed out the project, and was ready to clock out. I left the spare key on the counter. Then I walked out and didn't look back. Instead of driving home, or what used to be home, I checked into a quiet corporate hotel on the other side of the city. Business district. Anonymous. Efficient. The kind of place with neutral carpet and identical artwork in every hallway. Perfect for disappearing, at least temporarily. I dropped my suitcases inside the room and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone lay face up on the nightstand. I hadn't blocked Aaron yet. I needed him to see everything. I needed the shock to land exactly when he expected me to be smiling across the table at his birthday dinner. I waited. At around 4 in the afternoon, he texted, "Leaving work now. Going straight home to get ready. Can you grab that navy dress I like? See you at 7. Love you." The casual entitlement in the message was almost hypnotic, as if nothing had happened, as if the night before his confession, his pitying tone, the way he justified holding another woman in the dark, had simply been another conversation he'd won. He had no idea I was gone. No idea his big night was gone. No idea I had taken myself out of the equation so cleanly that it would take him hours to even understand what happened. I didn't respond. At 6 o'clock, hey, traffic is crazy. You on your way? I was sitting cross-legged on the hotel bed watching a documentary about coral reefs. The narrator's soft voice contrasted sharply with the storm I knew was about to hit his evening. At 7:12 p.m., the group chat he shared with his friends lit up. His friend Marcus posted a selfie of the four of them in an Uber dressed for the night. Aaron was smiling, completely unaware of the destruction that was waiting for him at the entrance of the vein. Birthday King on the way. At Susan, hurry up. Again, I said nothing. At 7:29 p.m., the first message that indicated the show was starting appeared Aaron. We're here. Hostess says the table isn't ready yet. Thought you said you called the manager. A minute later, Aaron. She keeps checking the system. Something's off. Where are you? Then Marcus, dude, what's going on? This is weird. I imagined the exact scene. The restaurant's elegant foyer, the soft murmur of conversation, the ambient lighting. Aaron standing at the host stand, confusion building, friends shifting awkwardly behind him. The hostess scrolling through the system, recognizing the note I had requested, debating whether to say it aloud. 7:35 p.m., Aaron, call me. Seriously. 7:37 p.m. Aaron. They're telling me the reservation was canceled. What the hell is happening? And finally, at 7:40 p.m., the exact moment the first emotional bomb landed, Aaron Reason says, service no longer needed. Why would they put that? It was almost poetic. Calls followed, 12 of them. I let everyone ring into the quiet hotel room. At 8:03 p.m., a voicemail arrived. I didn't listen to it. I didn't have to. I could predict the breakdown, panic, anger, humiliation, all boiling together with nowhere to go. He had built a narrative where he was the enlightened one, the emotionally evolved partner, the man with a spiritual connection to another woman. He had expected to walk into his birthday weekend feeling like a king. Instead, his friends watched him fall apart at a host stand. By 8:22 p.m., the tone had shifted from anger to fear. Aaron, I'm coming home. We need to talk. At 8:31 p.m., Aaron. Where is your stuff, Susan? What is happening? I exhaled slowly, lying back against the hotel pillows. He finally understood the first part, but he had no idea the worst part was still coming. This was only the beginning of the fallout he had earned. While Aaron paced our empty apartment, leaving frantic messages and tones that shifted wildly from confusion to anger to desperation, I lay comfortably in the neutral-colored hotel bed, the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the room. I didn't need to hear his voicemails to imagine precisely what he was experiencing. For the first time in our relationship, he was forced to sit with consequences that could not be argued away, therapized away, or twisted into a flaw in my character. Every ring of my phone was proof that he could no longer predict my reactions or control the narrative. He didn't know where I was. He didn't know what I was planning. He didn't understand the sudden unfamiliar silence. And for a man who believed he had complete emotional authority over me, that silence was a collapse. At 8:40 p.m., a text from him came through the tone noticeably different from the ones before it. Aaron, you moved out. Are you serious? Over a cuddle, Susan. You're being irrational. We need to talk. Come home. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. His desperation came through more clearly with each message. By 8:47 p.m., the panic was growing. Aaron, just answer me. Please. Where are you? We can't end a relationship like this. Talk to me. 8 minutes later, the anger surfaced again. Aaron, this is insane. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Lila and I are friends. That's it. You're acting like I cheated. A pathetic line given that he had already admitted to holding another woman in his arms in the dark. It amazed me how easily he had convinced himself that intimacy wasn't intimacy as long as he labeled it emotional support. After the initial storm, his friends began to contact me. It was predictable. Aaron had spent years convincing them he was the emotionally mature one, the guy who understood vulnerability, the man who helped his coworker regulate her panic attacks. They had no idea how he spoke to me at home, how he weaponized jargon, how he dismissed every boundary as fear-based thinking. At 9:02 p.m., I finally received the message I had been waiting for, not from Aaron, but from his friend Marcus. Marcus, what happened tonight? Aaron is freaking out. He says you canceled everything. Why? I typed slowly. Me, ask him about Lila. Ask him what happened in the break room. Then tell me how I'm overreacting. I hit send and put the phone face down. I knew exactly what would unfold. The moment Marcus confronted him with that question, Aaron would do what he always did, twist the truth until the version of events made him look noble and me look unreasonable. But this time there was no way to manipulate the facts. There was no angle that made I cuddled Lila in the dark for an hour while my girlfriend was at home sound rational. I turned on a nature documentary and let the low voice of the narrator wash over me. At 9:20 p.m., another text from Aaron. Aaron, please, Susan. I'm scared. I don't want to be alone tonight. Just tell me where you are. We can fix this. I'll block Lila if that's what you want. I swear. Just come home. There it was, the familiar three-step cycle of avoidance, defensiveness, and bargaining. He didn't understand that blocking Lila meant nothing. I wasn't fighting for him. I wasn't trying to salvage anything. I wasn't trying to correct his behavior so I could stay. I was finished. To him, this was an argument. To me, it was a resignation. At 9:28 p.m., a different tone entered his messages. Aaron, fine. Ignore me. But you still owe me for the hotel and the spa. You took responsibility for this weekend. You promised. I actually laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, just a quiet disbelief at the audacity of a man who could hold another woman in the dark, tell me it was my fault I was uncomfortable, and then insist I owed him benefits afterward. I responded once because it was enough. Me. I promised my boyfriend a birthday weekend, but he checked out on Tuesday to be single with his work wife. I'm just following through. Enjoy the silence. It's soothing, isn't it? 9 minutes later, Aaron, I hate you. I didn't reply. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Marcus and Jonah and everyone else connected to him. Not out of spite, out of clean boundaries. I didn't want updates. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want anyone trying to mediate or translate his narrative on my behalf. Then at 11:12 p.m., a notification appeared Instagram. I considered blocking him there too, but curiosity made me tap the icon. His story was a black screen with white text. The betrayal you never see coming hurts the most. Had heartbroken. #narcissist. The irony was so severe it bordered on comedy. According to Aaron, he was the victim of betrayal. He was the one blindsided. He was the one injured. The man who told me cuddling another woman wasn't cheating had now cast himself as the abandoned, wounded partner whose girlfriend destroyed him for no reason. But he had no idea what was still coming. He believed the canceled reservations, the empty apartment, and the silence were the final blows. He didn't know I had one more step to take, not out of pettiness, but out of responsibility to myself, to the truth, and to the woman whose life was being quietly rewritten behind her back. Because while Aaron had been comforting Lila in the dark, I had learned that Lila had a boyfriend of her own. His name was Jason. And unlike Aaron, he deserved to know exactly what kind of emotional intimacy his partner was investing in at work. So at 11:45 p.m., sitting in the dimly lit hotel room, I drafted an email. I didn't add emotion. I didn't embellish. I didn't threaten. I didn't insult. I simply stated what Aaron had told me, what he had done, and why I left. The subject line read Tuesday afternoon at the office. The body of the email was factual, brief, and polite. I read it over 3 times to ensure there was no cruelty in the wording, only clarity. Then I hit send. I placed my phone on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. The darkness of the room settled softly around me, but unlike Aaron's version of events, there was no panic, no whispered secrets, no trembling person in my arms. Just quiet, just peace, just the beginning of his unraveling, and the beginning of my freedom. The morning after I sent the email to Jason, I woke up in the hotel room feeling a strange lightness, like a muscle that had been clenched for years finally released overnight. I made coffee using the small machine on the counter and sat by the window, watching commuters flood the streets below. Normally mornings made me think about Aaron, what he liked for breakfast, whether he'd slept well, how his day would go at the office. But that morning, I didn't picture him at all. It was as if the center of gravity in my life had shifted back to where it should have always been myself. I didn't expect an immediate reaction from Jason. He was a stranger, and he lived in a different part of the city. For all I knew, he might not check his email before noon. But around 10:17 a.m., I saw a notification pop up on my phone. It wasn't from him directly. It was from an acquaintance of mine named Dana, who happened to work in the same building as Aaron and Lila. She sent a brief message. Dana, something huge is happening on the third floor. Did you do something? I didn't reply. There was no reason to respond until I knew more, and I certainly wasn't about to admit anything to anyone. I simply set the phone aside and continued sipping my coffee. Another message arrived moments later. Dana HR just pulled Lila out of a meeting. Aaron texted Marcus saying something is blowing up. I leaned back in the chair, letting the information settle in without emotion. I wasn't happy. I wasn't smug. I wasn't vindicated. I felt neutral, like someone watching a distant weather report. The storm had nothing to do with me anymore. At noon, the real wave hit. This time, it wasn't Dana. It was Aaron. His text came through from his work email, which I had not blocked. Subject: Susan, please answer me. The body of the email was frantic. Susan. I don't know what you did, but Jason just showed up at the office. He confronted Lila in front of everyone. There was yelling. Then HR got involved. Lila is saying I crossed boundaries with her. Me. She's telling them she felt uncomfortable and pressured, that I misread things, that I made her feel unsafe. Susan, what did you say to him? He told HR you contacted him. Why would you do this? I read it twice slowly. The way he emphasized his victimhood, his confusion, his disbelief. It mirrored the exact behavior he used whenever I brought up concerns in our relationship. According to him, Lila had been the one in crisis. He'd been the supportive one. He believed he was the protector, the emotionally mature partner offering comfort to a struggling coworker. He never once imagined that the intimacy he had built with her, the one he'd justified with therapy buzzwords, would be turned against him in the brutal clarity of an HR report. Not 3 minutes later, another email followed. Subject, please, I'm begging you. HR pulled me in. They said Lila filed a formal complaint for inappropriate emotional contact and unprofessional physical boundaries. They're talking about administrative leave. Jason was threatening to report me too. Susan. I swear I never touched her inappropriately. I was just helping her. Why would she do this to me? Why would you do this to me? I lost you. I'm going to lose my job. Please help me fix this. I closed my laptop. There was nothing to fix. There was nothing to explain. Everything happening to him was the consequence of a choice he'd justified as harmless. He had taken emotional intimacy that belonged in a relationship and handed it to someone else, someone who had no loyalty to him when the pressure rose. At 3:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a long email from Aaron over a dozen paragraphs. It was a spiraling monologue alternating between blaming me, pleading with me, and trying to reframe history. He insisted he didn't coerce Lila. He insisted she hugged him first. He insisted he never meant anything beyond support. He insisted Lila must be lying to save her relationship with Jason. He insisted I should tell HR the truth to save him. But the most revealing line was toward the bottom. You ruined my life. Are you happy now? I stared at those words without reacting. The absolute refusal to own his actions even now when they were swallowing him whole was exactly why I left. To him, everything was always someone else's responsibility. Even the aftermath of his emotional entanglement with another woman was somehow mine to resolve. There was no irony lost on me that Aaron, the man who spent months lecturing me about emotional accountability, had none himself. I moved the email to the trash. Later that afternoon, Dana sent one more message. Dana HR escorted Lila out of the building. Aaron was put on leave. Word is that Jason threatened to sue the company if they didn't take immediate action. People are talking. It's bad. Really bad. I typed back a simple reply. I'm sure HR will figure it out. The truth was, I didn't want to see him suffer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to watch him burn. I simply wanted him out of my life and out of the emotional framework I had been forced to live inside. The collapse of his work relationships was unfortunate, but it wasn't my responsibility. It happened because he made choices rooted in entitlement assumptions and the absolute belief that he could handle another woman's intimacy with no consequences. He had misjudged the woman. He had misjudged HR. He had misjudged everything. And now, without me buffering his life, the consequences hit him in the face with full force. That evening, I ordered takeout and watched a movie in bed. For the first time in months, I ate a meal without feeling on edge or anticipating another conversation about boundaries or emotional support techniques. My mind was clear. At 11 p.m., one last email came through. Subject, I'm sorry. Susan, I'm so sorry. I didn't see what I was doing. I didn't realize how far things went with Lila. I should have listened to you. I should have never pushed your feelings aside. I don't know what to do. I need you. Please talk to me. Please. I don't have anyone else." I read it, closed it, and let the silence answer for me. He finally felt alone. He finally felt what I had felt for months. And for the first time, it wasn't my job to save him. The next several weeks passed quietly, almost unnervingly, so as if life were recalibrating itself after years of imbalance. The corporate hotel room I had checked into began to feel less like a temporary hideout and more like a clean slate, a place without echoes, without tension, without the constant emotional labor of managing Aaron's moods, insecurities, and contradictions. Every morning, I woke up before my alarm, not out of stress, but out of habit, and realized I could simply lie there for a moment without rushing into another day built around someone else's comfort. It took me 3 days to find a new apartment downtown, a small loft with natural light, tall windows, and just enough space for me and the life I was rebuilding from the ground up. I signed the lease without hesitation, packed my things from the hotel, and moved in on a Thursday morning. Standing in the middle of the empty living room, with boxes stacked around me, I felt something I had not felt in years: control. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not my old mutual friends, not Aaron's friends, not even my extended family yet. The silence was protective, like placing a barrier between myself and every version of me that had tolerated things she should not have tolerated. I didn't owe anyone explanations, especially not the people who had watched Aaron dismiss my feelings for months and called it couple growing pains. I started building routines again. Morning runs by the river, evening tea instead of wine, cooking simple meals for myself instead of planning elaborate dinners around Aaron's cravings. I slept deeply. Something I had forgotten was possible. The tension that lived between my shoulder blades slowly dissolved, and with each passing day I felt more like myself and less like the woman who had spent years negotiating the bare minimum from someone who treated loyalty as an inconvenience. Meanwhile, updates about Aaron filtered in through people I hadn't blocked. I didn't ask for them, but some people can't resist delivering gossip under the guise of concern. After the HR chaos, Aaron was placed on a mandatory administrative leave while the investigation into his inappropriate emotional relationship with Lila moved forward. He had tried meeting with HR again, insisting everything was consensual, that he was the one providing emotional support, that it wasn't physical, that I had misinterpreted his intentions. None of it mattered. HR doesn't care about philosophical definitions of intimacy. They care about liability. 2 weeks later, the company mutually separated from both Aaron and Lila. Jason broke things off with Lila the same week. She moved out of their shared apartment, and rumors circulated that she had temporarily gone back to her parents' home in Oregon to reset. People who once adored her now whispered about her behind cubicle walls. As for Aaron, he didn't land softly. He spent days trying to apply for new positions, but several recruiters had already heard about the investigation. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when a workplace scandal includes emotional entanglement allegations of boundary crossing and administrative leave. His friends supported him for exactly 1 week, long enough to hear his version of the story, but not long enough to ignore the details that didn't add up. "Why didn't you talk to Susan about all this earlier? Why were you in the dark room with Lila for an hour? You told us you were helping her, but she said you made her uncomfortable." The same people who once praised Aaron for being emotionally aware were now distancing themselves in a panic. And Aaron, who had always believed he could control narratives through confidence and therapy jargon, found himself in a position he had no script for. By the 3rd week, he had moved out of our old apartment because he couldn't afford the rent without my income. He briefly stayed with Marcus, but that lasted exactly 4 days. Then he packed his bags and went to his parents' house in the suburbs. I learned all of this secondhand, not because I needed to know, but because other people needed to tell it. I didn't let myself dwell on it. His life collapsing wasn't my goal. My goal was simply to remove myself from a relationship that had eroded my self-worth. The rest was collateral damage. Around the end of the first month, I met someone new. It happened quietly with no grand intention behind it. His name was Daniel, and he was a trauma therapist at a clinic near my new apartment. We met at a bookstore when we both reached for the same novel, one of those cliché beginnings that actually felt real in the moment. He apologized. I laughed. We chatted about the author, and somehow we ended up walking to a cafe nearby. Conversation came naturally with him in a way that felt startling. There were no therapy buzzwords in the guise of manipulation. No subtle corrections disguised as emotional education. No quietly judgmental sighs when I expressed discomfort or personal boundaries. He spoke gently, listened fully, and didn't turn my concerns into academic discussions about emotional regulation. On our third date, he said something simple but grounding. Healthy relationships aren't built on one person's ability to endure. I didn't tell him details about Aaron, not at first, but I felt something shift inside me, a recognition that intimacy could be safe, that conversations could be mutual, that I didn't have to brace myself before speaking. Daniel was not a distraction from my past. He was a reminder that my past did not define what I deserved. Meanwhile, Aaron still tried to reach me through alternate routes. I had blocked his phone, social media, email, and friends, but he learned the value of persistence in the wrong way. He sent a handwritten letter to our old apartment, which the property manager forwarded to my new address by mistake. I opened it only because I didn't recognize the handwriting. It was 3 pages long, rambling, apologetic, self-pitying, and completely devoid of accountability. He blamed stress over work, emotional burnout, and even hinted that I contributed to his closeness with Lila because I had been distant lately, a laughable accusation, considering how much effort I had been pouring into his birthday. He ended the letter with, "We built a life together, Susan. You don't just throw that away." But he was wrong. I hadn't thrown anything away. I had simply stopped holding something that was already shattering in my hands. I folded the letter neatly and put it back in the envelope. Then I dropped it in the shredder at my leasing office. Life with Daniel continued, in small, gentle steps. Weekend coffee dates, walks through quiet streets, shared meals, conversations about goals and boundaries. It wasn't perfect, it was real, and more importantly, it wasn't draining. I didn't feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. By the end of the second month, I realized something monumental. I was finally breathing normally again. And it had nothing to do with Aaron. His downfall was his own doing. My peace was mine. It was bound to happen eventually. We lived in the same city, walked the same streets, breathed the same air. Even after he moved back to the suburbs, Aaron still came downtown for job interviews and networking events, desperate attempts to revive the career he'd watched crumble in his hands. So when it finally happened, when our paths collided in the most ordinary of places, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't even curious. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 2.5 months after I'd walked out of our apartment. I was inside a small coffee shop near my new building, a quiet place with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of roasted beans lingering in the air. I was waiting for my order, a pour-over brewed slowly, methodically, the way the barista did it every time when I felt someone step into my periphery. A familiar presence, but lacking the warmth or certainty it once had. "Susan?" The sound of my name was hesitant, almost fragile. I turned. Aaron stood there holding a worn leather messenger bag, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes bruised from lack of sleep. He was thinner, paler, and dressed in a suit that didn't fit him as cleanly as it used to. The confident posture he once carried, the thick, self-assured air he used to move through the world, was gone. He looked nothing like the man who once lectured me about emotional maturity at midnight, while texting another woman behind my back. He looked small, Aaron, I said with a calm nod. He swallowed, searching my face for something: anger, sadness, regret, longing. But I didn't give him any of those. I held my expression the way one holds a door, politely, briefly, without attachment. "You look good," he said softly. "I am good," I replied. "I'm doing really well." He exhaled shakily, as if those words alone knocked the air out of him. For a moment, he simply stood there, staring at the floor, fingers tightening around the strap of his bag. Then he lifted his eyes. "I miss you," he said. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you." But the punishment, his voice cracked slightly. It didn't fit the crime. I didn't respond. I let him speak. "I lost everything, Susan. My job, my friends." Lila turned on me the second Jason confronted her. HR believed her because she cried and said she felt pressured. "You know that's not true. You know I never pushed her into anything. But everyone else, they think I'm some kind of creep." His breath trembled. "And I lost you too. The only person who ever actually cared for me." The barista called out an order that wasn't mine. Aaron barely noticed. "You didn't just leave me," he said. "You erased me. I don't even know where my mistakes stop and your anger begins. Can't we just sit down and talk? Please. I need closure. I need you to understand that I wasn't choosing her over you. I was just supporting her emotionally." I finished for him, I remember. He flinched. "That's not what it looks like now," he admitted. "She used me. She made me feel important, like I was helping. I see that now. I was stupid. I was naive. But you and I, we had 3 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Can't we just talk this through? The old Susan, the one who had spent years compromising her boundaries to make him comfortable, might have stepped outside with him. She might have offered him reassurance, closure, a soft landing. She might have taken responsibility for his emotions, even now. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I took a slow breath and spoke with steady clarity. Aaron, do you remember what you told me in the kitchen the night before your birthday? His eyes flickered downward. I was angry. You weren't angry, I corrected gently. You were condescending. You looked at me and said, if you don't understand my needs, that's your issue. You said you wouldn't shrink yourself to make me feel secure. You told me I was the problem for not accepting your closeness with Lila. He closed his eyes as if bracing for impact. I tried to explain how I felt. I continued. I tried to communicate, but every time I expressed discomfort, you told me it was my fault. You used therapy language like a weapon. You made emotional boundaries sound like character defects. And when it all fell apart, you didn't take responsibility. You blamed me for the consequences of your own choices. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I didn't destroy your life, I said calmly. I removed myself from it. Everything that happened afterward was yours to own. His jaw quivered, the realization settling heavier than he expected. He looked around the cafe helplessly, as if searching for someone to witness his pain. But no one was watching. No one cared. He was just another man facing the echo of his own decisions. Susan, I'm begging you, he said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to lose you. I want to be better. I can be better. I hope you will be, I said softly, but I won't be part of that process. He shook his head, eyes shining with a desperation I didn't recognize. You can't just walk away. I already did. The barista called my name. Order for Susan. I stepped around him, walked to the counter, and picked up my pour-over. When I turned back, he was standing exactly where I left him, still defeated, hollow. Susan, he whispered, voice cracking, I love you. I looked at him carefully, searching for any old trace of the man I once loved. But all I felt was distance, not anger, not sadness. Just distance. I don't think you know what that word means, I said quietly. I didn't wait for his response. I pushed open the glass door and stepped outside into the cool afternoon. The sunlight felt clean on my skin, the breeze familiar, the world suddenly wide and open again. Somewhere a block away, a street performer was playing soft guitar. A couple laughed loudly as they passed by. Life was continuing beautifully effortlessly, and I felt myself step back into it without hesitation. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. Just picked up groceries, dinner at my place. I smiled. A real smile, not one built around someone else's expectations, not one earned through tolerance or emotional labor, but one that came from genuine peace. I typed back on my way. And as I walked down the street, leaving behind the man who had once convinced me that love meant shrinking myself, I felt the weight of 3 years fall away entirely. Service was no longer needed, and for the first time in my life, I was completely free.